The sun had barely risen over the calm waters of Pine Hollow Lake when I pulled into the gravel driveway of the ranch office. The place was quiet, serene just the way I liked it. The office sat on the far end of the lake, tucked behind cedar trees and overlooking the water like a watchful sentinel. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. I'd secured the lease 5 years earlier, bought the land around it shortly after, and built it into a private operations post, a quiet retreat for planning recon and handling business away from the city noise. The door creaked open with the same welcome it always gave me, and I stepped inside with a hot cup of coffee in one hand and a laptop bag slung over my shoulder. I'd only been there a few minutes, hadn't even sat down, when I heard the unmistakable sound of heels clacking hard against the concrete path outside. Sharp, angry, entitled. Then came the voice, "You're not supposed to be in there." It was Karen, the president of the Lake Pinewood HOA. Mid-50s, bob haircut, pastel windbreaker zipped to her chin like she was preparing for war, clipboard in one hand and phone in the other. She stormed in through the front door without knocking, like she owned the place. That was the thing about Karen. She didn't understand boundaries. She thought the HOA gave her authority over land, laws, and logic itself. "Good morning to you too," I said calmly, setting my cup down on the oak desk. "Don't play smart with me. This is HOA property, and you're trespassing," she barked, her eyes scanning the room like she was looking for a violation to fine me for. "No, it's not," I replied, opening the drawer that contained the land survey papers and lease agreement. "This building sits on private land, outside HOA jurisdiction. It's been in my control for years." Karen's face turned red. "The HOA board voted last month to include this stretch in the expanded maintenance perimeter. That means it's under our control now. You didn't get the memo." "I don't answer to memos," I said, showing her the boundary map and title documents. "I answer to legal contracts. This property has nothing to do with your perimeter or your board. You're standing in my office." Her hands trembled slightly as she pointed a manicured finger at me. "You think just because you wear tactical boots and drive a military truck, you can bully your way through our neighborhood? This isn't some base. This is a community." I kept my voice level. "Exactly, and a community means respect, not power trips. I've done nothing wrong. If you want to challenge this legally, go ahead. But if you don't have a warrant or a title change, I suggest you leave." That's when she lost it. Karen whipped out her phone and hit 911 like she was launching a missile. "You'll regret this," she muttered as the call rang. "I've had enough of your attitude. Let's see how you explain this when the cops drag you out." I leaned against the desk, arms folded. She really didn't know who she was dealing with. I'd spent 15 years in emergency response coordination, trained half the dispatchers in this county, and still consulted with the state on communication protocols. The 911 center was less than 5 miles away, and I had personally signed the dispatcher certifications hanging on their walls. She turned her back to me slightly, pacing in the room as the call connected. "Yes, I need officers at Pine Hollow Ranch office. There's a trespasser refusing to leave HOA property. He's being aggressive and wait. His name, yes, it's..." She stopped. Froze mid-sentence. "What's that?" she said again, confusion thick in her voice. "His name is..." "Yeah, that's him." A long pause. Then she blinked. Karen slowly turned around to look at me, phone still pressed to her ear. Her mouth opened slightly. "You want me to do what?" she asked the dispatcher. I could hear the voice faintly from where I stood, clear, firm, unmistakable. "Ma'am, that's my supervisor. I suggest you step away from the property immediately." Karen's face drained of all color. Her smugness crumbled into something else, confusion, disbelief, maybe fear. She lowered the phone slightly, looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. And I just smiled. I hadn't needed to raise my voice. I didn't call anyone. I didn't threaten, because when you operate with discipline and service, authority comes to you. And Karen, she had just dialed the last number she ever wanted to. Karen was still standing there in the middle of the office, her hand clutching the phone like it might save her from drowning. The smug expression she wore earlier had completely vanished, replaced with a pale, stunned look that was part confusion, part denial. Her eyes darted around the room like she was trying to find anything, to prove she was still in control. But it was too late. She had already triggered the call that would unravel her little power play. After that awkward silence, she stammered something into the phone, probably trying to recover. Well, maybe I was given the wrong information. He's not supposed to be here. I'm the HOA president. I watched her try to climb out of the hole she'd just dug. But you don't argue with the people who have worked emergency response longer than you've chaired a bake sale committee. Especially not the dispatchers trained to detect liars, manipulators, and overreaching suburban tyrants. She might as well have called the fire department to report that water was wet. The call ended, and Karen slowly lowered her phone. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her plan was falling apart right in front of her, and the witnesses were beginning to gather. A few neighbors who had heard the shouting began to walk over from across the road. One of them, Tom, who lived 3 doors down and liked to fish near the back dock, raised an eyebrow when he saw Karen inside. "What's going on here?" he asked. Sounded like someone called the cops. Karen straightened her posture and tried to regain composure. "Yes, I did. This man is occupying a facility under HOA territory. I had no choice." Tom looked over at me. I gave him a nod. "Actually, Karen's just confused. This office isn't under HOA jurisdiction. It's privately leased and personally maintained. She tried to force me out, so she called 911. Karen interrupted. "I wasn't forcing you." Tom cut her off. "Wait, you called 911 on him." His voice was full of disbelief. "He's the guy who helped upgrade our community response system last summer. You remember the wildfire alerts? That was him. You just called 911 on the guy who built the call center." Karen's face twitched. She looked like she wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, as if nothing she could say would make sense anymore. And then, just when things couldn't get more embarrassing for her, my phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was the dispatcher. "Boss, just wanted to give you a heads up," the familiar voice said. "We got the call, but don't worry, we already logged it as a false report. She said your name, and I figured something was off. We're sending a unit anyway to document the abuse of service. You good?" "Perfectly fine," I replied. "Thanks, Danielle." I looked up and met Karen's eyes as I ended the call. "A unit's on its way." I told her calmly, "Not for me." "For the report you just created?" "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, backing away from the desk. "You're seriously going to turn this around on me?" "I don't have to turn anything," I said. "You called 911 with a fake accusation. That's a crime, Karen. And worse, you wasted emergency resources for a personal vendetta." A couple more neighbors had arrived by then, and the whispers were spreading fast. People had their phones out, recording. Karen noticed. She quickly moved toward the door, trying to slip out with whatever dignity she had left. But the damage was done. Her attempt to publicly humiliate me had flipped entirely. She had gone from being bossy figurehead of the HOA to the woman who falsely reported an emergency because her ego got bruised. "Let me be clear," I said, my voice steady but loud enough for those outside to hear. "The HOA doesn't govern this land. It never did. And no amount of posturing or clipboard pointing is going to change legal boundaries." Karen stopped at the threshold. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "The board will hear about it." "They should," I replied. "They deserve to know exactly how you misuse your position." She left without another word, storming down the gravel in the direction she came. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle again. It wasn't the first time someone had underestimated me based on appearance or quiet authority, and it wouldn't be the last. But the beauty of doing your job right, of earning real respect, is that when someone calls for help to take you down, the voice on the other end already knows you're not the threat. Karen was nowhere to be seen the next morning, but her presence still lingered like the scent of burned toast. Word of her 911 call had spread like wildfire across Pine Hollow. People talked at the general store, during dog walks at the boat ramp. And almost everyone had the same tone, amused disbelief. A few residents even swung by the ranch office under the pretense of checking the lake weather, but really just wanted to hear the story firsthand. I kept things civil, didn't gloat, and stuck to the facts. Still, it didn't take much for folks to piece together the truth. That Karen had tried to weaponize emergency services over a petty power play and ended up exposed in front of the whole neighborhood. But I knew Karen. Silence from her didn't mean surrender. It meant regrouping. Sure enough, around mid-afternoon, a sleek black SUV rolled slowly up the gravel drive. It wasn't local law enforcement. It wasn't even code enforcement. It was worse. The HOA Executive Committee. Out stepped three individuals in matching polos with clipboards, sunglasses, and the sort of practiced tight-lipped smiles that told you they were here for business, not neighborliness. At the front was Mark, the HOA vice president, a quiet man with the spine of a paperclip, who mostly parroted whatever Karen told him. Behind him were two board members I'd only seen at the annual barbecue, the kind who cared more about fence paint colors than actual community service. I stepped out onto the porch and greeted them. Afternoon, looking for someone. Mark stepped forward. We've received reports of unauthorized usage of the old ranger station building. The HOA would like to conduct a visual assessment to ensure it aligns with community guidelines. It took everything in me not to laugh. This isn't the ranger station anymore, I replied calmly. And it's not community property. This building and the surrounding lot were decommissioned from the HOA zoning during the 2016 land reassessment. I have the paperwork inside if you'd like to see. Mark blinked. We were told by President Karen that the zoning had recently been updated to reflect HOA expansion, and that includes this site. I could almost hear Karen's voice in his head like a remote control in human form. I held back a sigh. That would be incorrect, I said. There's been no zoning update filed through the county. In fact, this land was formally exempted years ago and reclassified as commercial. Private. You're on private property right now. The board members exchanged glances. Well, said one of them, a lady in designer glasses, we're here in an observational capacity. We won't step inside unless permitted. But we do have to submit a formal note of concern about unauthorized occupation of HOA adjacent spaces. That's fine, I replied. Submit what you want, but if you try to enforce policy where it doesn't legally apply, you're going to end up on the wrong side of a real complaint. There was a short pause. Mark shifted uncomfortably, as if he hadn't expected this conversation to go this way. Then I took a step closer, keeping my tone professional but firm. Tell Karen something for me. I've spent years helping this community stay safe. I've run tactical coordination centers for state-level emergencies. I don't use that as leverage, but I won't let anyone treat me like a trespasser on land I pay taxes for, maintain, and operate under full legal right. Mark seemed to shrink a little. We understand, he said quickly. We'll review the documentation. They turned and walked back to their SUV without another word, their clipboards untouched. Later that evening, I sat on the porch of the office, watching the sky burn orange over the lake. Tom stopped by again, carrying 2 cans of root beer. She sent the polo squad after you, huh? He asked, settling into the chair beside mine. Yep, I replied. Came in, all official, left without saying much. Tom chuckled. You know, the funny part is, nobody actually likes Karen. We just got used to her barking orders and figured it was easier to let her run the meetings. Until someone says no, I said, "Exactly." He took a sip. "You've got backup, man. This community might have been quiet, but it doesn't mean it's blind. You keep handling things the way you have, and people will stand with you." I nodded, grateful, not for the drama, but for the reminder that real authority doesn't come from a title. It comes from integrity, from consistency, from knowing where you stand, and refusing to be moved just because someone like Karen thinks a clipboard and a phone give her power. By Thursday, it was clear Karen wasn't backing down. She might have retreated from the ranch office fiasco bruised and humiliated, but she hadn't lost her taste for control. If anything, she doubled down. That morning, I woke up to 3 official looking notices taped to the gate, the office door, and even one slapped on my mailbox, each bearing the HOA seal and a warning about ongoing investigation into unauthorized usage and security violations. I removed them calmly and walked into the office, coffee in hand. I'd dealt with bureaucratic intimidation tactics before. This was the HOA version of a scarecrow, designed to rattle nerves and make someone think they were being watched. But I knew the law, and more importantly, I knew the county ordinances. Karen had no jurisdiction here. What she didn't realize was that by escalating things, she was only making my case stronger. Around noon, I got a call from Ellie, my contact at the county recorder's office. She'd seen the HOA documents Karen submitted and flagged them as suspicious. "She's trying to rezone your parcel retroactively," Ellie said. Claimed the land was improperly classified in the 2016 split, but the file has your signatures, approvals, and a time-stamped registration that predates her involvement with the HOA. I smiled. She really thought no one would check. "She's either desperate or clueless," Ellie said, "or both." I thanked her and sent her a copy of the updated survey maps just to lock it down tighter. Then I got to work printing out every document I'd need for what came next, a preemptive legal shield. But the real fun started that evening. As the sun was going down and the orange glow lit up the lake, I noticed 2 unfamiliar sedans pulling up the gravel road. Men in dark uniforms stepped out. No badges, no visible name tags, and all with identical earpieces. Karen stepped out from behind them, holding a tablet and wearing that tight little smirk that told me she thought she'd finally won. "Security audit," she declared. "This is a private HOA operation to ensure no harmful activity is taking place on or near restricted land." I leaned on the porch railing, unimpressed. "Karen, you do realize bringing private security to a property that doesn't fall under HOA control is trespassing, right?" She waved a hand. "I've retained a legal team. We believe the classification of this land is under review, and until the matter is resolved, we have the right to inspect for safety." "No, you don't," I replied, stepping down. "You have the right to submit a formal complaint. That's it. Walking onto this property with what amounts to a fake task force, that's a civil violation, possibly criminal if you're impersonating official authority." She didn't answer. One of her so-called security officers stepped forward. "We'll be inspecting the perimeter," he said firmly. "Please don't interfere." That's when I gave a small signal, barely a nod. Within seconds, the side door of the office opened and 2 men stepped out. Then another from behind the garage. Quiet, efficient, and fully geared in discreet tactical attire. These weren't local guys. They were part of my federal emergency coordination team, off duty but well trained. We were having a planning retreat this week, and Karen had no idea she'd walked into a hornet's nest. One of my guys, Marcus, walked up beside me. "Is there a problem, sir?" Karen's expression cracked for the first time. She looked from Marcus to the others, calm, professional men who were clearly trained for more than HOA business. Her eyes narrowed as the pieces fell into place. "These are These are government agents, she stammered. No, I said. They're private citizens, just like me, but they're trained in tactical coordination, emergency response, and legal de-escalation, and they happen to be spending the weekend here with me. The security guards shifted uneasily. Karen took a step back. I suggest. I said evenly that you and your team remove yourselves from this property immediately. If not, I'll have to call the actual sheriff's office, and I have a direct line. There was a moment of silence. Then Karen turned on her heel, muttering something under her breath. The guards followed, getting into their cars and backing out like a dog caught digging in the wrong yard. As their tail lights disappeared, Marcus chuckled. She brought a security squad to intimidate you. Yep, I said. Didn't expect we'd be hosting the people who train actual law enforcement. I turned to go back inside, adrenaline fading as the cool lake breeze rolled in. Karen thought authority was about yelling the loudest or showing up with backup, but real power, it's quiet. It knows the rules, stays calm under pressure, and waits for the other side to overreach, which she just did. Again, the next morning started quietly, but the air was thick with tension. It wasn't just another Pine Hollow Friday. Everyone who'd seen what happened last night was talking. Karen had arrived with her private security team like she was filming a low-budget spy movie, only to get outclassed and outmaneuvered by people who didn't even have to raise their voices. But if I'd learned anything about people like Karen, it was this. When embarrassment doesn't stop them, desperation takes the wheel. And sure enough, by mid-morning, the real fireworks began. I was sitting inside the ranch office with Marcus and Olivia, two of the tactical coordination experts staying with me that week, going over some response drill notes. The coffee was fresh, the mood was relaxed, and it almost felt like the storm had passed. Then my phone rang. It wasn't a normal call. It was my emergency operations line, the one hardly anyone knew about. I answered immediately. Is this command? The voice on the line asked. This is McConnell. Who's this? This is Chief Dispatcher Janet Cruz from County 911. The woman said crisply. We received a priority call a few minutes ago. Caller identified themselves as the HOA president of Pine Hollow Estates. Claimed an armed occupation was taking place on ranch property near Lakeview Drive. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Let me guess, she described me, a group of unknown men, and tried to make it sound like a threat. Exactly, but here's the thing, sir. We checked. That parcel is legally registered under your name, and you were cleared as an Emergency Services Command affiliate 6 years ago. I just wanted to verify. Are you on site? I'm here, I said. We're holding a training workshop with tactical specialists. Off duty. Everything's peaceful. No threat. No illegal activity. That's what I figured. Janet replied. Your name triggered an internal flag. We were instructed to route any suspicious activity reports concerning you directly to me or Deputy Chief Bramble. She told us to treat you as Blue Evil. Clearance, smart move, I said. I appreciate the call. You need us to send anyone out. Only if they show up again. I think Karen's running out of plays. Understood. Be safe, sir. I hung up and turned to Marcus and Olivia. She called 911 again, this time with full-on fake claims. Marcus raised an eyebrow. She's escalating faster than I thought. 15 minutes later, just like clockwork, we heard sirens, 2 units approaching from the North Road. But instead of storming the property, the sheriff's deputies pulled up calmly and stepped out without even resting hands on their holsters. I met them halfway down the gravel path. Morning, Sheriff Ramirez, I said with a nod. McConnell, he greeted with a small smile. Looks like you've got a fan club in high places. Behind him, Karen was climbing out of her car, arms waving dramatically. There, that's him. That's the one who's got armed men inside a county building pretending to be government forces. Ramirez didn't even look at her. His gaze stayed on me. I'm gonna assume there's no armed takeover going on in your office. Just some tactical coordination guys having lunch and talking response protocols. I said casually. You're welcome to step inside if you like. Ramirez shook his head. I'm good. We've already been briefed. Karen froze. Briefed? What do you mean briefed? Ramirez finally turned to her. Karen, the county dispatcher flagged your report. This land is not under HOA jurisdiction. Furthermore, Mr. McConnell is known to this office, holds valid security clearances, and is conducting lawful activity. You've made 2 misleading emergency reports in less than 48 hours. Her jaw tightened. You're siding with him? No. Ramirez replied firmly. I'm siding with the law. You need to stop. For a second, it looked like she was going to say something else. But when she noticed several neighbors standing on the sidewalk watching, and one of them filming, she backed down. Without another word, she got into her car and peeled out, tires throwing dust as she vanished up the road. I stood quietly as the dust settled. Ramirez looked back at me and exhaled. She's not gonna stop until someone files formal action. He said. I'm working on it. I said, County Zoning Board, Legal Counsel, and now that we've got 911 records, it's all going in the file. You let me know when you're ready, Ramirez said, and I'll be there. Later that night, after the sun dipped below the trees, we sat around the fire pit behind the office. The team laughed and talked as the logs crackled, but my mind was elsewhere, already building the timeline, the case, the last puzzle pieces. Because Karen had crossed the final line, and now it was my turn.